Hey, it's Amjin Rakai here, and today's video is going to start off a little differently than most, where I'm going to actually kind of test your knowledge about the legendary rock band Queen, and in particularly what you might know about the very famous lead singer Freddie Mercury. For instance, you might not know that Freddie Mercury's actual real name was actually Faraka Balsara, and the really crazy thing when it comes to One Piece is that name Faraka actually means Joy Boy, and trust me, that is just the very beginning of the influences that Oda has used from Freddie Mercury and his life and his career and his art for the story of the One Piece manga series. And I decided that it was kind of time to do this video after the recent reveal of the Gorse member, Saint J. Garcia Saturn, whose name is very obviously a parallel or a reference to Jerry Garcia of the Grateful Dead band. And if you didn't know already, you're going to find out in this video that Oda uses tons and tons of musical references throughout the story. I think the most famous of all is probably Thriller Bark and Django, both being a homage and characters and places influenced by Michael Jackson and the Thriller album. And if you've watched enough of my videos by now, you'll know that I kind of personally think that part of the One Piece is a literal Starman who is locked away inside the belly of a whale at the bottom of the ocean. And of course, that Starman being a huge reference, of course, to David Bowie, whose real name in real life was Davy Jones, and his chart-topping single Starman from 1972 was actually the most popular record in Japan that year. And my wife and I are big music nuts. I used to work in college radio and wanted to do all that kind of stuff until I realized too late that radio was dead.
KZMB, all zombie radio.
But when we take a look at the rest of the series, there is just tons of musical references and characters and stuff like that, including, of course, the rest of the Gorse members, which now we've had their full names revealed, which I will have a video breaking down more about that very shortly, coming out. But just a peripheral glance at the rest of the Gorse, they all kind of look like other members of famous rock bands. I mean, this bald samurai guy looks strikingly similar to Brian Eno. St. Jupiter has a very strong resemblance, in my opinion, to Jim Morrison at the Doors. I think that St. Marcus Mars looks very similar to a member of ZZ Top. But like I said, I'll go into the rest of the Gorse members, including St. J. Garcia Saturn, in kind of one of my next coming up videos where I break down all about, more of their names. Because that is not what this video is going to be about. This video is going to be about basically breaking down all of the connections between Gol D, Roger, and Freddie Mercury, and kind of proving how Roger is actually the Freddie Mercury of the One Piece world, and what exactly that can mean for the past history, and most importantly, the future of the One Piece world and the story that we all know and love. Now, purely from a pop culture standpoint, you should all know who Freddie Mercury is, who, aside from, in my opinion, being one of the top 3 singers of all time, Freddie Mercury kind of very, very famously died from contracting the AIDS virus and was basically one of the first public homosexuals to really come out in the open. It was the day before he died, but come out in the open and talk about contracting the virus and bringing kind of a huge amount of light to that whole plight and virus. And aside from his tremendous talent musically, that's kind of one of the biggest things that he's known for in the history of the planet Earth, as well as having perhaps maybe the most fabulous mustache of all time. Kind of like, the one Roger has.
Do you think you're going to get to heaven?
No, I don't want to.
You don't want to?
No, hell's much better. Look at the interesting people that you're going to meet down there. You're going to be there too,
But just to kind of composite a quick recap of what I just said, because the obvious connections to Roger might have just been missed real quick. Freddie Mercury died of an incurable illness known as AIDS. Roger died of an incurable illness that we don't know the name of. Freddie Mercury was a homosexual. Gol D. Roger has the only known, as far as I can tell, crew of only male members. So if you're starting to pick up what I'm putting down, this is going to be the part of the video where, sadly, some people are going to become very upset and not like the things that Oda might be commenting on or talking about in his series. And it's not just the idea that Gol D. Roger may in fact represent homosexuality, which we will get into in a little bit in this video. Because while I think that's extremely valid, and we are going to talk in depth about that in a second. I think that Roger himself is actually more aligned to being just a fishman or a mermaid that kind of acts like a seahorse and is able to lay eggs.
Who plays on the album? Is there any sort of surprise guest?
Yeah, me.
You have a surprise for the Brazilian people in the Rock and Roll Festival?
The festival, yeah, it's me. I am the surprise.
But we have to get to that. Firstly, I've said in some of my videos before, but the name Roger can actually mean to kind of forcibly have sex with someone in a rough manner. But the name Roger and Rogering mainly means purely to copulate / reproduce, which makes a lot of sense because the Roger pirates literally have a giant fucking egg in the middle of their ship. I don't know what's more of a sign of reproduction than a giant polka dot egg. And before you jump to the comments or click off the video, I know what you're going to say. Roger can't represent homosexuality and same-sex relationships as well as also representing reproduction. He, mated with Rogue to have Ace. And aside from Rogue being mentioned in 2 to 3 pages and having an extremely vital role but absolutely no presence in the story other than just being a, in quotation marks, birth mother to Ace, I think that the real actual clue with all that is a huge connection between a very famous American comic series which touched on LGBTQ, all that stuff, issues in the 80s, known as the X-Men, and mainly being a reference to the very famous mutant character Rogue from the X-Men. Ace's mother, Porteous D. Rogue, sharing the same name with that character. Get it? He had sex with an X-Man, like X marks the spot of the treasure map? Or just Roger had sex with an X-Man, Rogue, to make Ace, but the main clue here is the X-Man part of the name, the man part, and I think it's even a reference to Oda's favorite author of all time, George R.R. Martin, who, in his other continuing series for the last 40 years, called Wild Cards, which is basically an X-Men type series of books set, after an apocalyptic event. The characters in that story sometimes have mutant powers like the X-Men, and the ones that are super strong are actually known in the story in universe as aces. But I can hear you now. Everyone's saying that there's no way that Oda could be referencing homosexuality or someone's freedom to be that and to pursue that lifestyle. And I think in a way, sadly, you're extremely right, because in Japanese society, and especially in Japanese manga, gay representation is very lacking. In fact, I would go as far as to say that it's disallowed in the actual Shonen Jump publication itself, but I can't find an official rule on that. But very famously, Araki, famed author of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, he very famously wanted to make Jolene from Part 6 a lesbian, and Shonen Jump denied that, which actually resulted in, after that Series 6 was kind of published and finished, he made the jump to V-Jump to tell more adult-oriented stories and be able to express relationships that he wanted to show. And I wouldn't say that homosexuality is vilified in Japan or anything, but it is, kind of less progressive than a lot of other places in the world. I mean, no place is perfect, but in Japan in particularly, if you're a same-sex couple, you cannot adopt children, you cannot get married. If you are a lesbian couple, you cannot get in vitro fertilization to have a child. It's actually legal to discriminate based on sexual orientation in many parts of the country. And Japan is actually the only nation of the G7 that does not recognize same-sex marriage in any way.
My God, there's room for everybody. Let's just say that.
Just got into LA today, and I don't know if this happened to you guys. As soon as I stepped off the plane here, the air hit my eyes, and my eyes would not stop watering. I was like, oh my God, right. So I went to the doctor here. I thought it was gonna be allergies. Plot twist, it was not allergies. Turns out, depression.
What the fuck is going on in here on this day?
America My Face is saying everything that you need to know.
And I'm not saying America is much better when it comes to that kind of stuff either. I mean, all you have to do is turn on any radio daytime talk show and...
No sports, no rock, no information for mindless chatter. We're your station.
KBBL Talk Radio, and now Springfield's favorite conservative and author of the well-selling book Only Turkeys Have Left Wings.
Hear bullshit about trans people and gay people and all sorts of things like that, corrupting the youth and corrupting, the integrity of America and all sorts of bullshit like that. And if that's something that you agree with, get the fuck off this video right now. To me, a huge idea of what freedom actually means is the idea that no one has the right to tell anyone else how they should live, within the bounds of the law or whatever, of course. But the idea of kind of telling someone that they can't love or be with who they choose to be with, I think is just the absolute epitome and opposite of what the ideals of freedom are supposed to be. But, whatever. I'm not going to talk about that this whole video. But I say all that to basically say that in Japan, there are still kind of taboos held between homosexual relationships and that kind of stuff. And that the taboos surrounding those are still kind of extremely prevalent in today's age in Japan. So if you're Oda, who is very obviously pro-gay and all that stuff, that he's very progressive to, that kind of lifestyle and everything, how on earth is he going to be able to kind of put in his ideals and ideas about how same-sex relationships are discriminated against in the world at large, especially from the world's perspective back in 1997? Oda kind of has a real problem here of how he can kind of put those themes into the story but have it masked in such a way that it will get through Shonen Jump's editorial staff. What can Oda do if he wants to bring his favorite singer and artist and kind of put and throw their life and history into the story? Well, in my opinion, he kind of creates a race that's centered around discrimination. The Fishmen. And it's no big shock that the Fishmen as a whole are a huge allegory to racial discrimination and things like that in the story. But I think that they're kind of almost used as an umbrella species or race to encapsulate all of the themes that Oda wants to kind of discuss and have us question about discrimination in general, including gay discrimination. And now that we're kind of finished with the precursor to this theory, we can get to the real spicy bits of this whole idea and kind of break down exactly how Roger is in fact a merman, mermaid, fishman character.
Look at those clouds up there. They're beautiful. And it's a perfect day for a drive.
Aw, Trixie, please stop talking. I'm trying to figure something out.
And so I'll just kind of break down where this idea kind of generated in me a few years ago about Roger mainly being a fishman because of his mysterious illness that he gets. Now, I said earlier in the video it's probably a allegory and parallel to AIDS, but I think in the actual story and the mechanics of the One Piece world, I think that Roger was a fishman or a merman who basically got some sort of a disease from breathing in too much oxygen. Aside from being hunted for food, one of the main natural causes of death for fish is actually oxygen getting stuck in their gills. And I think that Roger's illness as a fishman could be just the general idea that when a fish is out of water, it dies from getting oxygen in the air. But I think it also could maybe be related to something like how freshwater fish will die in salt water and vice versa. And especially early on in the story, the main kind of representation of fishmen was having gills on the sides of their neck, okay? And we've actually never seen the sides of Roger's neck. Even though he's basically been shirtless, he either always wears a scarf or it's blocked by the collar, and we never actually see if he has gills right there or not. We know, of course, that it doesn't seem like any of the Roger pirates ate any devil fruits, so they were all conceivably able to swim and swim well. And to me, if you were a fisherman, you would not want to give up the great swimming ability that comes with being a fisherman, so you would never want to eat a devil fruit. I think that would fit for Roger because he's, swimming and all this great stuff, and that would be how, also in the story, one ship, like Fisher Tigers, the Oro Jackson and Roger's crew would be able to survive so many battles as a single ship because they were able to utilize fisherman abilities and the sea itself. But don't worry, that's not the only clue I'm going to stretch out to prove that Roger's a fisherman. And I guess I'll take this moment to also kind of point out the English wordplay here. The word mermaids obviously has the word AIDS in it, which I think is actually something that Oda's using as a further clue to all this. But I really think the majority of the clues for Roger's fisherman heritage are actually contained in his twin brother, Tom. So first I want to draw your attention to how Roger reacts to meeting Tom again in Fishman Island during the Wano flashback. He arrives and Roger, Shanks, and Buggy all hug Tom like it's a long-lost family member. And actually, aside from Roger giving Rayleigh a hug and maybe kind of Shanks a hug, he's not really hugged anyone else in the series as far as I've seen. And actually what's very peculiar to me is throughout Frankie's flashback during Water 7, when we see Tom and them interacting inside the house and he's constantly laughing, Kokoro constantly makes mention of, Tom, be careful about laughing, you're going to hurt yourself. And I believe it's because he had the same type fresh air sickness that Roger may have had. And if you remember during Frankie's flashback during Water 7, the crux of Tom's story is trying to make sure that the world does not discriminate more against fishmen. And I think that one of the big reasons for that is because knowing that Roger was a fishman, what would that say to the rest of the world? That the biggest and baddest pirate of all time was also a fishman? There'd be kind of no way for the relations with fishmen as a whole to ever recover from that, I feel like, from the human side. And we even kind of have had hints too that the Gorsei are worried about that fishman relationship as well, because I think it all kind of ties into the idea that they're hiding that this big bad pirate, the biggest baddest pirate of all time, Gol D Roger, was a mermaid. But getting back to the main point about Tom the shipwright being Roger's brother, we know he made the Oro Jackson, but why exactly did he make the Oro Jackson? Why exactly was he trusted also with these Bluton blueprints and all of these things? And I think it's because Tom and Roger are kind of just small parts of a much bigger family. We've seen how vastly different the members of Tom's family can look from each other. Looking at his brother Den compared to Tom. And I think there's actually a much bigger reveal towards the later parts of the series where actually they're all kind of related to Whoop Slap, and that he may be the father or mother for all of these people. And of course Whoop Slap looks extremely similar to Tom's brother Den, the shipwright who still resides in Fishman Island now. And we all know that Whoop Slap is the mayor of Luffy's hometown. Well, an anagram for the word mayor is moray, which is actually a type of eel, a type of sea eel or a lamprey, and in particularly any carnivorous eel in the Moraniad family of eels. So, kind of makes you think about Chapter 1 and Shanks getting his arm bit off by Ursula's eel. And I know there's many ideas about the Sea Kings outside of Fishman Island, and when they're, during Roger's flashback, as well as after they've dropped off the Noah, that they're kind of referring to the D clan as someone who can fix the Noah. But I think it's much more likely and obvious that they're just referring to Tom and the Roger clan that can fix the ship, and those shipwrights who, they're so good at, creating buoyancy and stuff in ships because they can work underneath it, they can work in the water, they can work all over the ship and make it perfect, as well as the natural skills and abilities that being a fisherman and great swimmers provides to them when it comes to designing ships. I think that all of those Sea Kings are actually referring to this Roger clan of members who are normally shipwrights, not pirates. Roger might be the first one to actually become a pirate. And actually, the first character shown after the Sea Kings are talking about restoring or having that clan restore the Noah, we actually see a panel of Den, Tom's brother.
I haven't talked to you in 3 days. I cannot.
Then don't.
Disgusting. Disgusting. I can't believe on my daughter's birthday that you would drag my name through the mud like this. You are disgusting. Do you understand?
It's fucking disgusting.
I understand that all of that can, sound kind of crazy and be very abrasive and hard to accept, the idea that Roger's actually a fishman. And I agree. I think it is one of the deepest layers of secrets that Oda has kind of laid in the manga and in the story itself, is this idea that Roger is a merman. But the clues don't stop there. We just have to go a little bit deeper and kind of recognize the very obvious things that Oda tells us. One of the big things that I think Oda does is he shows the answer to huge secrets based on the scene itself. And in this instance, I'm mainly talking about, aside from SBS's, we find out the majority of the information we know about fishman genetics and how they can lay eggs and not look like each other and all that stuff from Tom's brother Den in Fishman Island. And that being kind of the starting arc of the new world and after the time skip in the story, I think could be a huge reference to this being big clues to Roger in the first part of the pre-time skip story and all that kind of connecting like crazy strings on a board, just to kind of show that we're finding out this information from the same family that's also all connected to Gold Roger through at least the making of his ship, the Oro Jackson, but that we're getting all this information from those characters to kind of be a sign that they might all be related. And from Tom's brother Kenny, we learn about the idea of fishermen laying multiple eggs and that they all hatch at the same time, essentially making them all a type of fraternal twins instead of being identical twins. And what's really interesting about that is the name Tom actually means twin. And the idea that Roger and Tom have a blood relation kind of goes a long way in explaining why exactly Tom was put to death for making the Oro Jackson, which we're told has not been done in the history of the One Piece world before. And that's putting to death the shipwright of a pirate's ship. But I think that the real secret there was that Tom was killed for the same reason that the Marines tried to hunt down every pregnant woman after Roger was executed for 11 or 12 months or 19 months, whatever it was, to try to find his unborn child, supposedly. That's all the same reasons that they were trying to end this Roger bloodline. And before you say it, I can already answer your questions. Why isn't Ace a fishman? Well, we learn in the SBS of Volume 10 that fishmen are mammals and that they can interbreed, and that merfolk can interbreed with humans and fishmen. So the idea that they could have a human baby, or one fish person could lay an egg and it be human, isn't that too far-fetched, and I think it is actually a huge possibility. And honestly, most likely what happened to actually cause Ace's birth, and perhaps some other huge characters that we know in the story as well. And I'm not 100% on what type of fish Roger might be. I think there's a chance that he's a goldfish, but I also think there's an idea that he could be a seahorse, and that's how he's able to kind of switch sexes and lay eggs and fertilize them. But I think it's much more likely that Roger might be some sort of a wolffish or orgfish, which has this huge mouth thing. And of course, Tom is a longhorned cowfish, which is also known as a horned boxfish, which just makes me kind of think of like buried treasure and boxes of treasure that pirates hide and stuff like that, all maybe being a clue to the real treasure of the series, which is kind of figuring out the innermost secrets. But I do kind of lean mostly towards Roger being a type of orgfish that have these huge mouths and are very creepy looking, and we actually kind of see one right before the crew gets into Fishman Island after the time skip. And actually, the first chapter that Tom is introduced, chapter 353, on the cover we actually see an orgfish, which I think is a huge clue to his brother Roger kind of being one of those things. But what's very interesting about the Roger laugh page and all of this stuff with fish or mouse and having a huge mouth is it's very interesting because we know that the ship that Roger and this pirate crew used to sail the Grand Line and find the One Piece was a ship made out of atom wood that was called the Oro Jackson. And obviously oro means gold in most languages. Well, originally in Latin it meant the mouth or pertaining to the mouth. That's what oro meant. So when we see this whole big image of Roger and laugh, I think the biggest clue here is he's actually an orgfish and it's in his mouth, and that's all inside, that the One Piece itself is maybe all hidden inside the mouth of a big beast or a whale at the bottom of the ocean or something like that. Which, funnily enough, there's all these stories about being stuck inside the belly of a whale and these huge, whales kind of being a representation of a huge sea monster as well as a huge kind of treasure to be found, like in Moby Dick, some object to be hunted after and lusted after. Orca originally meant sea monster, and it was related to the term Orcus, which meant underworld in folk etymology. But its archaic form was actually orc, which is where J.R.R. Tolkien actually got the term for the orcs in his Lord of the Rings book series. And I do believe that on a meta level, Oda is commenting on the idea of a specific race or specific races created in fiction just to be kind of the bad guy or the evil force, and commenting on how kind of, how hugely fucked up that is. That one race, whether they're demons or orcs or goblins or whatever, could be presented as being purely evil. And they're just bad guys and villainous characters simply based on what their race or species is. And I think that Oda is making a meta statement about how fucked up that is, which is also something I think that George R. R. Martin does in his books, where no one's really born evil. You're not really born anything. Your actions dictate whether you are good or bad. And I think that that's something that Oda and George are kind of commenting on in a very meta and real way in their stories, is that, blood does not determine if you are evil in the real world, and it should not dictate whether you're evil or not in a fictional world.
We all make choices, but that was a choice.
Who said Jesus?
And to finish off this video, we're going to tie back in a little bit to, like everything with One Piece, Dragon Ball. And it's eventually going to really blow your mind just how much, pretty much everything in One Piece does actually relate back to Dragon Ball. But the word oro in Japanese can actually mean tail. And in Japanese it can also mean lochia, which is a word for the normal postpartum vaginal discharge of blood, mucus, and placental tissue that is discharged from a female's vagina several weeks after she has given birth. Okay? So this Oro word in Roger's ship, the Oro Jackson, hides inside of it another huge clue to the idea of birthing something or someone. Aside from, like I said earlier, the most obvious giant fucking egg in the middle of the ship. And I think all of that kind of ultimately for the story itself, I think is a huge clue to this idea that Roger may have laid a bunch of eggs before he died, and those eggs hatched and became characters that we know and are following in the story.
I'll carve your lungs out, boy.
You'll do no such thing. This one's a girl, you idiot.
And if all that hasn't scared you off already, thank you so much for watching the video. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel and share this video. The channel is so close to 1,000 subscribers, and that is really kind of the first stage of my dream, is to get, 1,000 subscribers on YouTube is kind of like entering the grand line of channels. And basically, we're just so close. And as a reward, once I get 1,000 subscribers, I'll actually put my wife's voice and opinions in an upcoming video. But basically, I can't do it without all of you guys. So thank you so much for watching the video. Comment if you agree or if you disagree. I try to respond to every comment. And with all of that, my name is Adam Jin Rakai, and I'll talk to you all next time. Bye-bye.